let's
Okay.
start by just saying and spelling your name for me.
Okay, my name is Marci McCaulay, and that's M-A-R-C-I, and the last name is McCaulay, M-C-A-U-L-A-Y.
And Marcy, just tell me a little bit about yourself, what you're running for, and why you decided to run.
Sure. First, Adrian, I just wanted to say I really appreciate your taking the time to do these interviews because, as you know, this is a really important race and it's important to educate people about what's going on. So this is the race for state representative for House District 72. This is a position that's currently held by Larry Householder, and as of just maybe a week or two ago, he was the only candidate in the race. And as it stands now, he's still the only candidate whose name will appear on the ballot. But what I decided to do, as others have, is to file my papers to run as a write-in candidate. And I'd say the two main reasons that I made this decision at this particular time in this particular race are two words: choice and voice. I just feel really strongly that it's important that everybody who lives in this House District 72 has a voice in the State House. And it's my understanding that right now, Representative Householder is restricted from interacting with other members of the House. And so that really can limit the kind of work he can do on our behalf. Now, if he is reelected moving forward, that would be a concern for me as well. So that got me thinking, so to have a voice, we also have to have a choice. And so for me, having a choice means there needs to be other names on the ballot. Well, once we pass the deadline for Householder to withdraw his name, which would have allowed parties to put names on the ballot, the only other option, as I'm aware of, is to have candidates file as write-ins. Now, I realize this is a complicated process for people to understand and to engage with, but the most important thing for me is to educate people about the importance of having this voice and representation, but also to know that they have a choice. That just because only one name appears on the printed ballot, whether you go in person or whether you're requesting an absentee ballot, just because only one name is appearing on the ballot doesn't mean that's your only choice. You have the right, and I'm encouraging people to take the responsibility to get to know the other candidates who are write-ins and see them as possibilities. And the other thing that I think people need to realize is you need to educate yourself about the write-in process. What does that really mean? How do you find out who the candidates are? How do you educate yourself? Well, this is one way. Thanks to Adrian and NBC4, we're having an opportunity to get our voices out there and to be heard so that people can find out who we are and make a decision. But as I said to you on the phone, Adrian, I'm learning about the write-in process. I'm not sure in all my years of voting I've ever taken advantage of that option. As I'm understanding it, and I don't want to say too much because I want to make sure that the election folks give the right information about this, but you need to make sure that you know you have this option and find out how you actually write in someone's name. And so that's what I want to really encourage people to think about.
You know, as a constituent of Larry Householder right now, I would just love to hear what your reaction was after the arrest and obviously after hearing what he's accused of doing.
Well, that's a really good question, Adrian. And I want to just say that in terms of my campaign and what I'm running on, I don't want to pass any judgment about what anyone has done or been accused of, other than to say that it sounds like it's very serious charges, and I don't think the indictment would have been brought down if they hadn't have a lot of evidence for some pretty serious violations. But I think we need to wait and see what happens with the rest of the process. And so the main thing that I was concerned about was what I already mentioned, that what it means for the constituents to not have a voice and to have a representative who was removed from being Speaker of the House, but was not removed from his position as being our representative. And so as a constituent, that's what concerns me the most. I want the process to move along as it will, and the information will come out, and we'll find out a lot more information, I'm sure, down the road. But for right now, I don't want to in any way sit in judgment about someone else or what they may or may not have done.
Do you think that Larry Householder should step down? I know a lot of his House colleagues have called for him to give up his seat. Do you believe that that would be the right choice?
I think, I would hope that someone in that position that is no longer really in a position to be a viable representative of their constituents would take that step. And I think others have said that regardless of whether there's innocence or guilt, that the fact that he's not really able to fulfill the responsibilities, the same reason that the House, I think, acted to remove him from being the speaker, or maybe, I think the same thing applies for continuing to be in a position as a representative.
And now just talking about you, for those who haven't gotten the chance to meet you, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you think you bring to the table as a candidate for the House District of 72.
Thanks. As I mentioned to you earlier, I just was working on my personal statement today and asking myself that very same question. Who am I and why am I running for this office and why do I think I have something to offer? And so I have some notes in front of me here, so if I'm looking down a little bit, it's just because I was really thinking for a while about this, and some people had approached me to see if I knew anyone else in Perry County who might be interested. And the person that approached me actually is someone I'd worked with on a grassroots initiative for the fair districts, fair election movement. And I was so pleased to see that that grassroots initiative actually did lead to some changes. And so it was kind of ironic that that person reached out to me about this possibility of running as a write-in, when the work we did on gerrymandering, to me, is one of the reasons why we were in the situation we're in, where there's only one name on the ballot. Because in a district like 72 that's heavily leans toward one political party, it's really hard to get someone to run, especially against an incumbent and against someone who has a fund. And so that, I thought it was kind of ironic that that was the person that reached out to me, because it just brought back up all the gerrymandering. So as I said before, to me, the most important thing is that voters know they have a choice, and I want to help to give that choice. I look at what we're facing in our district, in our state, in our country right now with unprecedented crises, health crises, economic crises, and social crises. And I think about what my experiences have been in my professional and personal life that helped prepare me to step in at a time like this. And so what I said to myself when I was writing this was, some people would look at me and say, you're a very unlikely candidate to be running for this position. And others might say, you've been preparing for this your whole life. Now, ironically, just about a year ago at this time, I was preparing to take a month-long trip out west. Recently retired, my partner and I were ready to go travel with our teardrop trailer and our 2 dogs and take a trip out to Utah, Colorado, and Arizona and visit some national parks. And so when I thought about that was just a year ago, I never could have imagined where I would be sitting here today, a year later. And then I thought, I don't think many people could have imagined where they'd be a year later. So much has changed in our lives. But I also was thinking about the fact that that was embarking on an adventure where I knew there were going to be a lot of unknowns, but I was prepared for that. I had done my mapping. I had gotten my, all of our gear organized, what we're going to take with us. And I feel the same way about this position. My career, my professional career, has been in the fields of public health, mental health, and education. I first got my undergraduate degree at Indiana University, and back 50 years ago, when I was starting my undergraduate career, I decided I wanted to be a political science major, and I had the audacity to say to myself, who knows, I might someday be the first woman president. Well, I've since thought that was just ridiculous, even to have ever thought that, but now it may actually happen in my lifetime, and so that's kind of fun to think about. My first political office was not really political. My first elected office was in high school. I ran for and was elected treasurer of our student body. I grew up in a town in southern Indiana, actually Columbus, Indiana. So when I say I'm from Columbus, most people don't assume I'm going to say Indiana as the punchline. But it was a great town to grow up in. I was so fortunate to have so many resources and access to quality education. And really, I think that instilled in me a real sense of community and connection and what can happen when a community comes together and really works together for the betterment of all. So fast forward, I retired just 2-3 years ago, and my first job in my professional career is what brought me to Ohio. After my undergraduate work, I got my PhD in clinical psychology at the University of Colorado. When I completed that work, I took my first teaching job at Denison University in Granville, Ohio. So I first moved to Ohio in '81. I retired from Denison a few years ago, and my last position there was in student development, directing the Center for Women and Gender Action. So the in-between part has been all kind of different interesting things I've done in my professional and personal life. I've worked with and for private and public institutions in the health field, in mental health, in education. I ran for office unsuccessfully before, 2 times, and I worked for the census 10 years ago. So I just feel really blessed that I've had the opportunity to do so many different things. And I was ready for retirement. I was happily enjoying retirement. But I really feel like in the last few months since March, my world has just really shrunk. And I think many people have felt this. But one of the great things that's happened as a result of that is I feel like I've slowed down and I've actually explored more and got to know more about the people and places and things right around me locally. And I've come to appreciate all the wonderful things that are right here, literally in my backyard. I'm so lucky to live on Buckeye Lake. We have this amazing resource. We have water, wildlife that's literally in our backyard. We're surrounded by great communities with great people. And so as I've been thinking about the crises that we've been facing, I also been thinking about the resiliency and the caring and the compassion that I've seen all around me. And I just think it's wonderful that we have these resources. And so I feel like with the skills and experiences that I have, I'm prepared to be a voice for our district. And I'm prepared to let people know that they have a choice. And I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a good listener, and I'm not going to do it alone. And so I'm calling on the people of our district to educate themselves and to reach out and educate other people and to stay involved. It was the words of John Lewis, actually, that I think probably tipped me over the edge on his passing when he said, or many people repeated his quote, excuse me, "If you see something that it is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something. You have to do something." So I feel like this is the time, this is the place to stand up, to say something, and to do something.
And obviously, at this point in the race, you're not able to be with one of the parties on the ticket. But what should voters know about you on where you stand as far as your party affiliation?
I think that's another really good question, Adrian. And while I want to make sure that every person, every voter in our district knows that if I'm elected, I will represent every person in our district. It's also important to know that in the past, when I've run for office, I ran as a Democrat and identify myself as a Democrat. That doesn't mean that that's the only way that I'm going to think about things, because Democrat can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So it's important to know that that's what my affiliation is. But it's also, I think, important for people to hear that as elected, it's not about me. It's about you. And I need to know what the views and values are of the people of my district, which I'm just beginning to learn what some of those things are. I'll be honest, I'm early in this process, and I'm still learning where all the precincts are in Licking County, because the line is not a straight line to follow where the district actually is. I did get a chance to visit Coshocton County a bit when I volunteered for a recent project that the Ohio Department of Health was doing, studying the coronavirus throughout the state. And I happened to just be assigned to work up in the Coshocton area. So I got to know it a little bit better. So again, I know there's a lot of diversity in our district, and I know that a political affiliation matters to some people, but I want to just be very clear that while it's a part of my history and part of my identity, it's not my whole identity. And I really take seriously the role of represent, meaning one represents the people, not one's own views.
And obviously, you're kind of running on a tight timeline along with the other write-in candidates. What does the next couple months leading up to November look like for you?
You've got some really good questions, Adrian. I think today, talking with you is one example of what the next few months may look like. Somebody warned me when I told them I was thinking about this. They said, well, remember, once you file, it's going to start moving fast. Because I was also thinking when I was contemplating this, I said, gosh, last time I was, knocking on doors, I was going out and meeting with groups. I said, this is going to be an atypical campaign with a very atypical situation. So what are the next few months going to look like? So for me, the most important thing is doing exactly what I'm doing right now, which is taking advantage of every opportunity to educate the constituents of our district about what's happening, what their choices are, what their options are, and how they can go about voting write-in. So I see myself having opportunities like this, hopefully again in the future, being very engaged with other media outlets to be able to get the word out through newspapers and through websites and through television and radio. And I do anticipate that I will have a Facebook presence and a website once I get some assistance with that. But I think that a lot of it may be virtual. There may be something like what's happening right now, where we can get a group of people together to talk about this. But the most important thing for me is, like I keep saying, is just to educate people about the process.